The Opinion, the Zelenskyy Illusion. Welcome to The Opinion. Today we examine a difficult question. Is Ukraine still functioning as a wartime democracy, or has President Zelensky's government moved toward political survival under permanent emergency rule? Since Russia's invasion, Ukraine has operated under martial law. Elections have been suspended, opposition media space has narrowed, and power has become heavily centralized in Kiev. Supporters argue these are wartime necessities. Critics argue they are signs of democratic erosion. The reality sits in a gray zone, and that matters. To understand the issue, we need to start with martial law. Ukraine suspended presidential and parliamentary elections under wartime legal provisions. Kiev argues that holding elections during active invasion, mass displacement, and missile attacks would be logistically impossible and politically destabilizing. Western governments largely accept this argument. Critics, however, argue something else is happening. They claim martial law has become more than a temporary security measure. Under this view, emergency powers increasingly protect political control. Opposition figures have seen restrictions, media has consolidated under wartime broadcasting systems, and critics inside political or military circles sometimes face investigations or dismissal. Supporters of Zelenskyy respond that wartime states historically centralize authority. Britain during World War II, the United States after 9/11, and Israel during major conflicts all expanded executive power. Their argument is simple: fragmented politics during national survival can become a security risk. But critics ask a different question. When does temporary emergency power become permanent political structure? Public morale is another fault line. Official polling has often shown continued support for resistance against Russia and high approval for wartime leadership. Yet war fatigue is visible. Years of mobilization, casualties, economic strain, blackouts, and uncertainty place pressure on any society. The harder question is whether polling in wartime fully reflects public opinion. In highly polarized security environments, citizens may hesitate to openly criticize leadership. That does not automatically mean support is false, but it creates uncertainty around how deep public frustration actually runs. Then there is the issue of political survival. Some critics argue Kiev's leadership has strong incentives to maintain wartime condition, fearing political backlash over corruption allegations, military losses, or failed expectations if the war ends without victory. At the same time, there is no hard evidence proving that extending the war is primarily about personal legal protection for leadership. That claim remains political analysis and opinion, not established fact. Western governments face their own dilemma. The United States and European allies continue to frame Ukraine as a democracy under attack. Publicly acknowledging major democratic backsliding could weaken domestic support for military aid and fracture political unity inside NATO and Europe. For Western leaders, the calculation appears strategic. Supporting Ukraine remains tied to containing Russia and maintaining European security architecture. So where does this leave Ukraine? The likely reality is uncomfortable for both sides of the debate. Ukraine remains under extraordinary wartime pressure, and democratic compromises have clearly expanded under martial law. At the same time, Ukraine still maintains institutions, civil administration, and public legitimacy that many wartime states struggle to preserve. The real test may come after the war. If elections resume, opposition reopens, and emergency powers are rolled back, wartime restrictions may be remembered as temporary necessity. If not, critics of Kiev will argue the emergency never truly ended. This is a developing situation, and as always in geopolitics, facts on the ground matter more than political messaging. Subscribe to The Opinion for direct geopolitical and military analysis.